Interpretation of double taxation avoidance agreements (TAs) is primarily guided by the customary principles of which international convention, Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties (VCLT). How does the interpretative basis of TAs differ from domestic tax laws? TAs are based on international agreements and the VCLT, whereas domestic laws rely on principles from national courts. According to article of the International Court of Justice (ICJ) statute, what serves as evidence of general practice accepted as law? International customs. In the context of international law, what are teachings of highly qualified publicists used for? As a subsidiary or auxiliary means for the determination of rules of law. What are the 3 additional documents that, along with the main DTA text, form part of the agreement for interpretation purposes? Protocols, memoranda of understanding (MAU), and exchange of information. VCLT is a treaty that codifies customary international law for the interpretation of tax treaties. VCLT is a multilateral treaty. Under the golden rule of interpretation, words should first be construed according to their and natural meaning. According to their plain and natural meaning. When should the literal grammatical interpretation of a treaty be rejected under the golden rule? When it results in an absurdity or marked inconsistency with other portions of the treaty. Which interpretation approach focuses on the common intention of the contracting parties at the time the treaty was concluded? Subjective interpretation. The purposive interpretation approach is also commonly known as the and purpose method, objects and purpose method. Where can the intention of the parties be identified for a purposive interpretation? In the preamble of the treaty, its protocol, and the technical memorandum. The principle of effectiveness requires that a treaty be interpreted in a way that renders it most effective and useful. Under the principle of effectiveness, an interpretation should enable the provisions of the treaty to work rather than making them void. What is the core premise of the principle of contemporaneous expositio regarding treaty terms? Terms are interpreted based on their meaning at the time the treaty was concluded. The liberal construction principle states that treaties should be interpreted to carry out the intention of the parties. Apparent intention of the parties. The integrated approach dictates that a treaty provision should not be interpreted in but as a whole. Should not be interpreted in isolation. According to the principle of consistency, treaties should be interpreted in the light of existing law. Existing international law. Which article of the Vienna Convention identifies preparatory work of the treaty as a supplementary means of interpretation? Article 32. According to Prof. Stark, Extrinsic aids can be used to interpret a treaty provided that they do not dash clear words in the text, do not contradict clear words. How can provisions in parallel tax treaties assist in interpreting a specific DTAA? If the language is similar, the more elaborative treaty can help understand the intention of the parties. Why is the mutual agreement procedure MAP considered a highly authentic extrinsic aid for interpretation? It involves bilateral negotiations between officials who possess the original documents exchanged during signing. Which model convention focuses on residence-based taxation and was framed by developed countries? OECD Model Convention. Which model convention represents a compromise and focuses on source-based taxation? UN Model Convention. What is the primary purpose of the commentaries annexed to the OECD and UN Model Conventions? To help in interpreting the model conventions and provide templates for negotiating treaties. Under what condition can reliance be placed on model commentaries to interpret a specific DTAA? When the contracting states adopt the text of the article as per the model convention without any change. Define the static approach to interpreting terms not defined in a tax treaty. Interpreting the term based on its meaning at the time the treaty was signed. Define the ambulatory approach to interpreting terms not defined in a tax treaty. Interpreting the term based on its meaning at the time of the treaty's application. When is the ambulatory approach prohibited in treaty interpretation? When there is a radical amendment in domestic law that changes the sum and substance of the term. According to the general rule in Article 31 of the VCLT, a treaty must be interpreted in good faith. Under VCLT Article 31, a special meaning is given to a term only if it is established that the so intended, parties so intended. If a grammatical interpretation leads to a result that is manifestly absurd, which VCLT article permits recourse to supplementary means. Article 32. In the Abdul-Razak Amendment case, what source did the AIA rely on to determine the intention of the parties to the India-UAE Treaty? Speeches delivered by the finance ministers of India and the UAE. What is the status of model commentaries if a country is a signatory to the model convention but the actual treaty text differs? The commentaries are not binding on the countries. A treaty should be interpreted to render it most effective, a principle particularly stressed by which judicial body? Permanent Court of International Justice. What happens to an existing treaty if a new peremptory norm of general international law emerges and conflicts with it? The treaty becomes void and stands terminated. Which extrinsic aid acts as a bilateral negotiation tool to resolve ambiguities in treaty provisions. Mutual Agreement Procedure MAP. Why might a court refer to commentaries by authors like Klaus Vogel or Philip Baker? They are considered classic and authoritative sources for understanding and interpreting tax treaties. In the Union of India v. Azadi Baka Andolan case, the Supreme Court noted that treaty interpretation principles differ from those used for legislation. Statutory legislation. True or false, that ambulatory approach is generally favored by model commentaries and technical explanations. True. What is the Latin term used for other treaties relating to the same subject matter? In pari materia. Context for treaty interpretation under Article 31 of the VCLT includes the text, its preamble, and its annexures. Which connecting factor subjects a company to tax in its home country? Residence link. Which connecting factor subjects a company to tax in its host country? Source link. Success of any law depends upon the manner in which it is and administered. Interpreted and administered. Are the rules of interpretation for tax treaties considered rules of law? No, they are principles of construction rather than enacted rules by a legislature. The OECD model commentaries represent the views of member countries, while UN model commentaries represent the views of views of a group of experts. If a treaty amendment is clarificatory in nature, which version of a commentary should be resorted to under the ambulatory approach? The latest version, e.g., 2017 version for a 1977 treaty.